How's it going? Daniel again, Mr. Cuervo Racing. Today I'm going to show you how to install the throttle housing onto a throttle body. This applies to the Raptor 700, Grizzly, many other fuel-injected bikes, even the two-wheel bikes as well have a very similar setup. All right, here we go. First thing, we got a billet throttle body here, 54 millimeter. What we're going to do first is we're going to make sure that the plate is closed, and we're going to make sure that when we rotate it, looking at this side of it, when we rotate it counterclockwise, that the plate opens from the top freely and everything moves freely. So it's closed, rotate counterclockwise, it's opening from there. So we're starting at that position where we're rotating it in a clockwise direction and it's closed. And first thing we're going to do is there's an O-ring, the always forgotten O-ring that goes in first. Sits all the way down in that bucket there. We're going to put the throttle housing, or cable housing, I forget what they call it in the book. Sits all the way down. You're going to have two 5 millimeter screws, bolts, whatever. These are Loctited. I already put blue Loctite on them. We'll set down in there and we will bottom those bolts out. So I'm holding the back of the plate closed just with my hand. You don't need to do that while you're installing this right now. It's just kind of out of habit that I'm doing that. So get these screws wound down. These don't have to be super tight. They got to be pretty snug, but they don't have to be torqued in excessively. Okay, so we're at this point now, and the next part that goes in is this spacer dowel. That's going to drop onto the shaft. It should move freely. It should be able to drop on and off of there freely. That is important. Next thing that goes in is the coil return spring. There's a notch right here that this leg, this ended leg, goes into. So that drops right down in there and stops. So at this point, this is kind of where you end up using two hands to do the rest of this. So there's this plastic or nylon bushing that goes in here. Now here's the problem is if you don't hold any tension on this spring, kind of rotating it counterclockwise, then this bushing can fall inside the coils of this spring. It can fall back behind one of these rings fairly easy. So I'm keeping a little bit of tension on there while I put the bushing in. So just holding a little bit of tension so that bushing don't fall down. So here's your I forget what they call this part. Basically, cable goes on here to rotate the cable cam, something of that sort. But basically, as you can see, let's see, there we go. As you can see, it has a tang that sticks off, and you're going to look at it in this orientation. So that's the way it goes on. You can see it has a slotted hole that's not round. Same with the shaft. It'll fit right on there perfectly. But so at this position, I'm holding a little tension on there. It hasn't really moved much. I'm going to latch this cam and get my hand out of the way. And then I'm just going to hold it, kind of holding it against that shaft. So at this point, I'm going to make sure that that plate is closed and rotate this counterclockwise, making sure this bushing does not fall down in those coils. So I only rotated about 3/4 of a turn. Not quite a full turn. We'll back that up and I'll show you again how far you need to go. So there's no tension on the spring. Pretty much no tension there. Just holding it with my hand. Grabbing that tang and making sure the shaft is closed with this hand and rotating it around about 3/4 of a turn. At this point, you need to line up the slot with the shaft and push and wiggle it down. Make sure it seats flat. Now, some of these aftermarket throttle bodies I've seen in the past where the shaft lengths are not quite right, or some type of clearance has changed where it's hard to see, but where this plate will actually bottom out in the housing because the clearance is not right there. So you want to make sure at this point that that shaft moves freely, that there's no binding. Make sure that the bushing did not fall down in the coil once again, and then put on your lock washer as well as the nut. So at this point, there's two things that can go wrong. One is everybody likes to over tighten this nut. As you can see, there's only half of the threads are actually there due to the fact that that shaft has flat sides. You only got about half of the thread engagement, and this nut is a jam nut style thin nut, so it's a real thin nut. Not a lot of thread there, so you don't want to go crazy in tightening this. It's got a lock washer. You can use some Loctite on there. The other thing is, if this stop screw is too far out, this plate will contact the bore, and as you're tightening, it can over twist, and basically you're putting all the pressure on this plate and you can damage that plate. So you want to make sure at this point that as I'm opening and closing that plate is not binding in the bore. So I can go and tighten up this nut, snug it down, and this part will be ready to install. So that's all it needs. That's the magic trick. Once you get it on the bike, then you can readjust this for idle speed. But hope that helps somebody. I know that's a struggle a lot of guys ask me about. I think there's a magic trick to it. It's fairly simple. Actually, there is one more thing that I do to these, and that is apply lubricant. This is white lithium grease, and I will push some down in that spring area and make sure that spring's lubricated so it doesn't rust. It just helps all that area. You can get some on your throttle cable as well. This grease is really thin, really lightweight, and it doesn't want to, over time it doesn't dry up, so not concerned with it binding the cable at all, because it stays really thin viscosity. But that's it for today. Thank you.